Hi, Fred at Magoosh here. Today we're going to go over a specific strategy of what to do when you encounter a score plateau. And I emphasize specific strategy because there's a lot of you can do it kind of material out there, and that's very valuable. But what we're covering today is something more on the analytical side of how to, if you're stuck in the 500s range, to maximize your chances of pushing into the 600s, or in the 600s into the 700s, or perhaps just incremental gains. When you feel as if you've been, despite how long you've studied with the exam and how many questions you do, stuck in the same kind of band, the same range. And the short answer, the TLDW, if you will, the too long didn't watch, is to find out in what areas you're weakest, and in what areas are tested the most during the exam, and where they intersect. Now, that's kind of a duh statement. Well, of course I'm going to focus on the things that have the highest return on investment. But we as tutors have found out in Magoosh, and actually data shows that people actually tend to underallocate time to those very subjects, usually from not knowing what they are, and second, from just needing to get a little bit better at that one subject that's already fairly good. So, with that being said, this video will really focus on that particular strategy and how to use it. Let's jump in. Now, this resource is fascinating. It breaks down into allocations the chances that you're going to see certain types of questions on the GMAT itself. And it's tempting for any test preparation institution to tell you to study everything because they're all important. And that is true to an extent because these are baselines. You could happen to get a few more geometry questions than is average. But realistically speaking, there are going to be certain subjects that are a little more important than others, and that you would be wise to allocate a bit more time onto them than to others. And by the way, you can find this kind of resource in many places online. This comes from Magoosh, but you can also find this in on other websites. They can disagree a little bit on percentages. In particular, I've seen probability jump up or down 2 or 3 percentage points on their hierarchies. This is still valuable because they tend to agree with one another on the order, on the rank of where they appear on the exam relative to others. I want you to concentrate on the top line and bottom line here. Really think to yourself, have I been spending time in those subjects? Or have I been spending too much time on those subjects, conversely? It's really worth it to make sure that you know integer properties and arithmetic and two-dimensional geometry, but far less so functions and coordinate geometry. You should know it, but if there's a particular weakness in one of them, focus on that. And so, going back to that Venn diagram, we're going to write in, or you're going to write in, those subjects from top to bottom. And you can also do this by finding something like this for verbal as well. Now let's go to the other side of the circle. Now, on the other side of the Venn diagram, we're going to put your relative weaknesses. Please, I encourage you to run as much off of data on this side as you can and not off of memory. It turns out that we're quite manipulated by loss aversion, which is to say that we remember the things that stung the most. Oh, that one particular question that was just so difficult on the exam. And you might find that's a greater weakness than it actually is, only because you couldn't answer the 700 level version of it, but you could the 500. Meanwhile, you're missing most 600 level versions of another type of question, but it flies under the radar because the pain is low. So what's my point? You're going to need an error log. Now, there are multiple ideas, and I'll go through just a couple of them. Your own personal log, if you've already done this, that's great. I hope you didn't over-engineer it. You're not going to need pivot tables and charts and Monte Carlo simulations, anything like that. You're just going to need to know two different things. What was the question? and what was it testing. If you don't have that, that's okay. You also have practice tests. So if you've been taking the official practice tests, the official guide practice tests, you have a lot of data. And as an aside, by the way, many institutions, the Magooshes and Manhattans of the world, they create practice tests, and they're quite good in that they test subjects as close to the exam as they can. Truly, the official tests are, because they've been made by the actual test makers, just a cut above. Just a reminder to people who are studying. After that, you can actually use the error logs from test prep websites. So whether you're using Magoosh or another provider, they actually will allow you to look at error logs on there, and that can be a valuable resource. And finally, GMAT Club. And you might have noticed I went past a practice test pretty quickly there. There's a way to combine these two things, and so I'm going to actually show you how to do that next. This is if you don't have a personal log from which you can already get this data, or a test prep website. So this is for you if you don't already have those things. Let's jump in there. Now, if you study the GMAT for a while, it's likely that you've run into GMAT Club in some capacity. If you haven't, that's fine. GMAT Club is a community-led resource, so it's a little bit more like a Reddit, let's say, where there's some excellent content and there's some subpar content. But the real reason why it's valuable is that on the official practice tests, there is little to no explanation. In the book, there's a small explanation, and online, there's no explanation. So you regularly find yourself having to Google the question in order to find how other people solved it, which leads you to GMAT Club. Now, a very neat feature that most people don't utilize with GMAT Club is their error log. If you have an account and they're free, you can actually go to answer the question and it appears in your error log. So if you're logged in, you click A, B, C, D, or E, it will appear in your error log and give you a link to this error log, which will appear like this. And this is quite neat because it will actually document for you not just when you got the question wrong, or right, it actually documents both, but what type of question it was. To make this clearer, let's export to Excel, which you can see above, and see what that looks like. And it'll look like this. And this is quite interesting. Now, as a tutor, I've taken multiple questions, but you might see if we go all the way to the last column, and we can sort A through Z to make it easier for us, that certain types of questions I got wrong more frequently than others. Your list will likely be shorter, and this will jump out a little more. In this particular case, my goodness, assumption questions. I better work on that. Assumption is a kind of critical reasoning question. So while I might have thought those weakens questions were just so annoying to me, it turns out I've got an issue with the assumption questions, and I didn't even realize it. So start to write in what you see most frequently occurring, verbal or quant, in that right circle, that error log circle of the Venn diagram. All right, so we've covered, using quant as an example, what are the most commonly tested subjects, and then second, how to use data when you're looking at what you're getting wrong, as opposed to intuition, which should be relied on only if you cannot get the data. So what next? And I leave that to you. Why? Why do I not give a specific tip here? Because it really depends on your study schedule. I definitely recommend that you create this and that you especially look at verbal. And I'll tell you why. Many people will say, I have a sentence correction issue. Well, that's fine, but what kind of sentence correction issue? Is it that you're getting diction questions wrong? Or is it that you are getting parallelism or modifiers or some sort of grammatical issue that you weren't aware of before? That's going to be valuable data from which you can derive some sort of study plan. But what I do recommend at a minimum is that you create a plan to address these sooner rather than later. So perhaps something like you take 5 questions on each of these subjects a day. Perhaps it's that you say, before my next test, I'm going to go back into material, perhaps in the official guide or on a provider like Magoosh, in those subjects. Whatever you do, make a plan. And so the rest is up to you. I hope this was valuable, and it's quite general on purpose because nobody studies quite like you do. I hope that this helps. Good luck. You can do it. Bye.